If you've ever lived in a neighborhood run by an HOA, you probably know there's always one person who takes the rules just a little too seriously. In my case, that person's name is Laura. Blonde bob haircut, peach lipstick, always clutching a clipboard like it's an extension of her soul. Laura is the self-appointed sheriff of our cul-de-sac. The irony? She doesn't even hold an official position on the HOA board. But that's never stopped her from patrolling the sidewalks like a one-woman code enforcement unit. I live in a quiet suburb just outside Portland, Oregon, the kind of place where people wave as they walk their dogs and gossip over their fences. We have block parties in the summer, potlucks during the holidays, and until recently, we had peace. That is, until Laura noticed my garden. I'll admit, it's not your typical front yard. No trimmed boxwood hedges. No perfectly manicured Kentucky bluegrass. I planted a native plant garden, wildflowers, pollinator-friendly shrubs, even a charming cluster of milkweed for the monarchs. It looks a bit like a meadow spilled out onto my lawn, but that's the point. It's intentional, and frankly, it's beautiful. Bees hum peacefully through the blossoms, kids stop to stare at the butterflies. And I swear the air smells better on my side of the street. Apparently, Laura disagrees. It started with a sticky note. Yes, a sticky note. Left on my mailbox. Your yard does not comply with HOA landscaping guidelines. Please address this immediately. Laura. No official HOA logo. No date. Just a passive-aggressive slap of yellow paper stuck where the mail goes. At first, I laughed. I honestly thought it was a joke. My neighbor 2 houses down, Mr. Dalton, has 6 ceramic gnomes dressed as Marvel superheroes guarding his front lawn like the Avengers. And across the street, the Thompsons still have a blow-up Santa deflating in their side yard. But I'm the problem? I decided to do what any rational person would do. I ignored it. Big mistake. 2 days later, I opened my mailbox to find a formal citation from the HOA. Violation of Community Landscaping Guidelines, Section 4.2, Unapproved Plantings. The fine? $75. Now I knew Laura had pulled strings. Or more likely, she pressured the HOA president, poor old Mr. Harrington, into signing off on her crusade. I called the HOA office, trying to clarify what rule I had supposedly broken. Is there a specific list of approved plantings? I asked. Well, stammered the receptionist, technically, Section 4.2 is about maintaining a visually cohesive aesthetic with community standards. Meaning, grass? I asked. I guess, she replied. I hung up and just stared at my garden. Orange coneflowers, purple lupin, golden yarrow. They swayed gently in the breeze, like they didn't have a care in the world. Meanwhile, I was fuming. Later that evening, while trimming back some overgrown coreopsis, I spotted Laura walking by with her dog, a yappy little thing named Duchess, wearing a pink tutu. She didn't even look at me. Just narrowed her eyes at the salvia and sniffed like the flowers had personally offended her. I gave her a polite wave. She didn't wave back. Classic Laura. To understand Laura is to understand someone who thrives on control. She's the type who shows up to HOA meetings with a color-coded binder, cites obscure bylaws like they're scripture, and once argued for 30 minutes about the correct shade of beige for garage doors. Rumor has it, she once called code enforcement because a neighbor had a political sign in their window, inside their home. She's not exactly well loved, but she is feared. Which is how she's managed to bend so many people into submission. Me? I don't scare easily. Still, I could feel her campaign ramping up. A week after the citation, I came home from work to find another notice, this one claiming my wild landscaping was creating pest habitats. And inviting snakes. Snakes? In Oregon? I couldn't believe it. Later that weekend, I was chatting with Margaret, my next-door neighbor and low-key my HOA gossip plug, when she leaned in and whispered, "Laura's going around saying your garden's lowering property values." I blinked. Really? Yup. She said your milkweed looks like weeds. That it's attracting mosquitoes. And that she saw a raccoon the other day and can't prove it's from your yard but highly suspects. I snorted. Raccoons don't need my permission to exist. Margaret cackled. Tell that to Laura. So now I was the problem neighbor. The environmentalist troublemaker with a pollinator. Paradise. And Laura? She had her sights locked on me like I was an invasive species. But I wasn't going to back down. I started documenting everything. Every letter. Every comment. Every time she lingered in front of my house too long or took photos for records. I even set up a camera facing the sidewalk, just in case. And in the midst of all this, something hilarious happened. My garden started drawing fans. First it was a couple from 3 streets over who stopped to compliment the bee balm. Then a local high school biology teacher asked if she could bring students by for a field trip on native plants. Then a woman from the state conservation office knocked on my door and asked if I'd considered applying for the Sustainable Suburbia Showcase. What? I stammered. It's a statewide recognition for homeowners who implement native planting designs that promote local ecology, she explained, smiling. Your yard is one of the best I've seen. That's when an idea began to bloom. If Laura wanted to make my garden the neighborhood disgrace, maybe I could make it the town's pride. But that part comes later. For now, I just stood there with the application form in my hand, while Laura walked by again. This time with her ever-present iced coffee and a neon vest that read HOA Volunteer Patrol. Duchess waddled behind her, tutu flapping in the breeze. She gave me a smug glance. I smiled. She had no idea what was coming. If I thought the sticky note and HOA citation were the worst of it, I was sorely mistaken. Laura, it turned out, was just getting started. The next Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of a camera shutter, that click 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 noise you normally hear from tourists, not from someone photographing your yard from the sidewalk. I peeked through the blinds and, sure enough, there was Laura, crouched like she was on a nature safari, phone in hand, zooming in dramatically on a patch of wild clover near my mailbox. I stepped outside casually. Everything all right there, Laura? She didn't flinch. Just kept snapping. Just collecting documentation, she said flatly, then scribbled something in a tiny notebook she kept in her cardigan pocket. I blinked. Of my clover? She looked up, giving me that rehearsed, professional smile that never quite reached her eyes. Of potential violations. HOA rules are in place to maintain a certain standard. You understand. Duchess barked once, like she agreed. I crossed my arms. You know this garden is designed to support native bees, right? Monarchs? It's not just pretty, it's ecological. Laura tilted her head. Well, we also have rules about visual harmony. That was her favorite word, harmony. As if a single milkweed could send the whole neighborhood spiraling into chaos. Later that day, I received an email from the HOA titled, Urgent, Review of Property Condition, Special Hearing Scheduled. Attached was a PDF outlining accumulated violations, now totaling $225 in fines. Apparently, I had failed to address previous citations, expanded unapproved plantings, and, I kid you not, demonstrated an unwillingness to work cooperatively with HOA volunteers. That last one? 100% Laura. Margaret dropped by that evening holding a bottle of wine and a smirk. "Thought you might need this," she said, handing over a cheap but dependable Pinot Noir. I poured us 2 glasses while she gave me the scoop. "So I overheard Laura at the post boxes earlier. She's trying to push for lawn uniformity mandates at next month's HOA meeting. Meaning? She wants to ban native gardens entirely unless pre-approved and certified professionally. Landscaped." Her words. I nearly spit out my wine. "But she has a dying patch of turf with 3 plastic flamingos and a cracked bird bath." Margaret laughed. Hypocrisy is her cardio. That week, tension bloomed across the neighborhood like dandelions in spring. Some neighbors subtly distanced themselves. Others whispered support when Laura wasn't looking. Then came the HOA hearing. It was held in the community clubhouse, an old building with folding chairs and a surprisingly hostile thermostat. Laura showed up early, dressed in an off-white blazer and holding a folder labeled Exhibit A. I wore jeans and a sunflower tee. The HOA president, Mr. Harrington, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. He cleared his throat as the hearing began. "Thank you all for coming. We're here to address alleged violations concerning resident Emily Foster's landscaping." That's me. I forgot to mention, Emily. I work remotely as a freelance copywriter, and I really hate public conflict. But as Laura launched into a full slideshow of offenses, including a blurry image of a butterfly perched on a black-eyed Susan, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was amused. She clicked to a slide titled, Visual Disharmony and Community Risk. "I believe," Laura said dramatically, "that Emily's yard, while perhaps well-intentioned, promotes overgrowth and pest infiltration. I have seen rabbits nesting under the echinacea." Someone snorted from the back. I raised my hand. "Rabbits are pests now?" Laura frowned. "They dig. And if we allow every resident to landscape freely, it creates a slippery slope. What's next? Chickens? Goats?" I almost laughed. Chickens didn't sound half bad. Mr. Harrington rubbed his temples. "Thank you, Laura. Emily, would you like to respond?" I stood, calm and clear. "Yes, I'd like to submit this." I handed over the conservation program's brochure and my pending application, complete with photos of my yard and letters of support from 3 neighbors, including Margaret. Also, I added, I've reviewed the bylaws. Section 4.2 doesn't prohibit native species. It simply requests aesthetic alignment, which is subjective. Furthermore, I've maintained all walkways, trimmed all growth, and complied with city water use guidelines, something traditional lawns often don't. Mr. Harrington blinked. "That's very thorough." Laura crossed her arms. "But it looks messy." Mr. Harrington looked at the photo of my blooming milkweed next to a monarch caterpillar. He sighed. "We'll review this and respond by next week." After the meeting, a few neighbors came up to whisper their support. "Don't let her bully you. Your yard's the only one with color. I saw hummingbirds there last week. Don't change a thing." It felt good. But Laura wasn't finished. The next morning, a note was taped to my door. "Pending further review, we recommend suspension of planting activities to avoid escalating penalties. Signed again, Laura." Except this time, I had proof. She wasn't an official HOA board member. She wasn't authorized to give directives. I emailed the board, including photos of the letter, and asked for clarification. Their reply? "This letter was not issued by the HOA. Please disregard." I printed that email out and posted it right next to my mailbox, laminated for good measure. The best part? People noticed. Neighbors started slowing down to read it. Some even took pictures. A small but growing Tide of support began to swell. Then came the cherry on top. The Conservation Committee, the one I'd applied to weeks ago, showed up for a surprise visit. 3 volunteers in khakis and wide-brimmed hats stepped into my front yard and began taking notes. One of them, a woman named Tanya, smiled warmly. "You've created a gorgeous, sustainable space here," she said. "I hope you're ready for some attention. This could win the regional category." As they were packing up, guess who walked by? Yep. Laura. She froze mid-step, watching the group shake my hand and hand me a bumper sticker that read, "Certified Pollinator Habitat, Be Kind." I turned to her, smiling sweetly. "Good morning, Laura. Lovely day for biodiversity, isn't it?" Her lips twitched. Duchess sneezed. Laura walked off without a word. The whispers in the neighborhood turned into chuckles. People started asking me for tips on reducing their water bills. A dad and his kid down the street asked if they could plant milkweed too. Laura, on the other hand, doubled down. 2 days later, I got another letter, not from the HOA this time, but from the neighborhood Beautification Council. A new entity Laura had apparently formed herself. The letter claimed my aesthetic plantings were now nominated for review under community aesthetic policies and included a fake-looking seal at the bottom that read, "In partnership with civic neatness initiatives." I laughed so hard I had to sit down. This woman had created a council for neatness. I knew then that we were approaching a tipping point. Because while she was busy inventing fake councils and forging fake seals, I was quietly finalizing something else. Something glorious. There's a funny thing about people like Laura, they always push one step too far. They start with rules, then escalate to threats, then, eventually, they trip over their own sense of power. It happened on a sunny Thursday afternoon. I was outside, clipping some dried stalks off my goldenrod when I saw Laura marching down the street, not her usual walk, but a mission march. Her clip-clop flats hit the pavement like punctuation marks. Behind her trailed Mr. Harrington, the HOA president, and Susan Chen, another board member. Both looked less than thrilled. Laura held her phone in one hand and a clipboard in the other, the holy sacraments of the self-righteous. They stopped right at my garden. I stood up, gloves in hand. "Emily," Laura said, voice tight, "we're conducting an in-person inspection based on a recent complaint." I tilted my head. "Another complaint? From who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she handed me a document with a fresh new header. Neighborhood Beautification Task Force, which, as far as I could tell, was just her. The paper accused me of failing to maintain visual cohesion, harboring potentially invasive flora, and, my personal favorite, creating a disruptive visual experience for passing traffic. Mr. Harrington sighed. "Laura, we discussed this task force isn't officially recognized." She ignored him. "Emily, I'll need to take updated photographs for the file." That's when I lost it, calmly. I stepped forward, smiled, and said, "Actually, I'll take it from here." I reached into the little mailbox-shaped storage bin next to my front steps and pulled out my clipboard. Inside was a printout of the State Conservation Award finalist letter. Tanya, the conservation rep who visited a week ago, had emailed me personally. "Congratulations," it read. "Your property has been selected as a finalist for the Oregon Sustainable Landscaping Award. We're planning a community walkthrough, open to press and the local paper." I handed the page to Mr. Harrington. "This inspection? It's already happening. Just not the one Laura planned." He blinked. "Read it. Then read it again." Laura tried to peek over his shoulder. "Is this real?" she asked. Susan Chen nodded slowly. "I've heard of this program. It's a big deal. Big enough, I added, that our local news station might show up. Laura paled. I'm happy to walk you through the garden, I offered sweetly. Show you the native sedge patch, the rain garden that helps reduce runoff, and the certified monarch habitat. Certified? Laura choked out. I smiled. Yep. Official. I even got the little sign and everything. She blinked rapidly, processing the fact that her crusade against weeds had just earned me statewide recognition. Mr. Harrington handed the paper back. I don't think we need any more photos today. And just like that, the power shifted. From that day forward, Laura's influence began to crumble. Slowly, deliciously, like a stale cookie dunked in tea. Neighbors stopped fearing her. Some even mocked her, subtly at first. A few began putting up pollinator-friendly signs of their own. Margaret planted lavender by her mailbox. The Thompsons turned their side yard into a no-mow zone. Then came the cherry on top. I was in line at the local farmers market one Saturday when I spotted a small flyer on the community board. It read, "Worst lawn in town? Nominate an eyesore. Let's celebrate the wildest yards in our suburb." The flyer included a QR code and, in tiny print, said, "Sponsored by Green Spaces Coalition, humor is healing." I couldn't help it. I scanned the code. There it was, a nomination form. One field asked for a photo. Another asked for why this lawn should win. I uploaded a snapshot I had taken just a few days earlier, Laura's patchy browning turf with 2 tilted flamingos, a plastic pinwheel, and that birdbath with algae in it. Reason for nomination? A performance art piece that explores the collapse of HOA hegemony through dying turf. I didn't think much of it. Until 3 weeks later. That's when the local news station came for my garden feature. The reporter, a woman named Eliza, was bright and curious. She had a cameraman, a microphone, and a kind smile. "We're doing a segment called Eco-Heroes in the Suburbs," she explained. "Your yard's one of 3 being highlighted." They filmed butterflies. They got close-ups of the bee balm. They interviewed the biology teacher from the high school, who said my garden had inspired the next generation of environmental stewards. It was surreal. Until the cameraman accidentally panned too far and caught Laura standing across the street, arms crossed, watching like a hawk in pressed khakis. Eliza whispered, "Who's that?" "Local antagonist," I murmured. No comment. That night, the segment aired. It was short but powerful. I watched it curled on my couch with Margaret, who brought popcorn and sparkling cider. They showed my yard. They showed bees. They showed me talking about intentional ecological design. And then, they segued into a quirky local segment about that other flyer. Eliza Campbell reports on a new tongue-in-cheek contest that's drawing laughs across town, worst lawn in the neighborhood. They showed 5 entries, all anonymous, with blurred house numbers. But Laura's was unmistakable. Eliza narrated, "This one, described as an ironic homage to control, featuring flamingo surveillance and dead turf, has racked up the most nominations. Organizers say it's all in good fun." I nearly choked on my cider. Margaret screamed. "Oh my God." We watched as the camera zoomed in on one of the flamingos, which had toppled sideways. The birdbath bubbled mysteriously. Eliza signed off, "Remember, folks, water your grass, or maybe plant some wildflowers instead." We laughed until we cried. The next morning, I found a flyer in my mailbox. This one printed in aggressive red ink. "Defamation is not a joke. I have contacted legal representatives. Laura." I taped it next to my conservation award and took a picture for my scrapbook. But she never did sue. Because, just a few days later, the HOA board met again. And something incredible happened. Susan Chin motioned to formally update the landscaping bylaws to allow native gardens. She cited my recognition, the attention the community had received, and the ecological benefits. The motion passed 4-1. Guess who the one was? Laura. She sat in the corner, lips pressed into a line, her flamingo kingdom now officially surrounded by bee sanctuaries and mulch paths. And just when I thought it couldn't get better, it did. A few days later, the actual Neighborhood Beautification Council, not the fake one Laura made up, sent out their annual newsletter. Featured prominently was an article titled, "Gardening Against the Grain, How One Woman Turned HOA Headaches into Habitat." And right underneath? Honorable mention, Worst Lawn Award, for accidental postmodernism in suburban aesthetics. With a blurred photo of Laura's flamingos. The caption? "The birds are watching. But who's watching the birds?" I printed 2 copies. One for me. One mysteriously left on Laura's porch. If you ever need proof that karma wears gardening gloves, this story might be it. By midsummer, everything had changed. My once controversial native garden had become a neighborhood staple. Kids called it the butterfly yard. Joggers slowed to admire the golden swaths of coneflowers and purple verbena. One man even asked if I sold honey. But the biggest shift? The community itself. Turns out, people were tired of being policed. Margaret started a group chat titled "Rewild the Block." Within a week, it had 12 members and a spreadsheet of drought-resistant plant suggestions. Mr. Dalton, the one with the Marvel gnomes, added a tiny Captain Pollinator statue to his yard. The Thompsons built a bug hotel. Even Susan Chen replaced her petunias with yarrow. The HOA didn't fight it. Not anymore. After that landscaping bylaw vote, they changed their tune. Publicly, they said they were adapting to reflect modern ecological trends. Privately? They were just relieved Laura had lost her unofficial chokehold. But Laura herself? Let's just say the flamingos weren't looking so proud. Her once aggressively beige house now looked lonely. Neighbors who used to avoid her now ignored her. She had become a silent fixture, still walking Duchess daily, still peeking over fences, but noticeably quiet. Until one morning. Trash day. I was out front, waving goodbye to the compost truck, when I heard a sharp voice behind me. "Excuse me, Emily." I turned. Laura, in her signature khakis and white cardigan, stood with her arms folded tightly across her chest. Duchess, tutu intact, sat beside her like a pink puffball of resentment. "Yes?" I said, genuinely curious. "I've noticed," she began, with the careful tone of someone trying to keep composure, "that you've become quite the figure in the neighborhood." "That's kind of you to say." Her jaw twitched. "I just hope you're aware that trends change. People get excited, then bored. They move on." I blinked. "So, you're saying the bees are just a fad?" Her nostrils flared. "No. I'm saying, not everyone agrees with this rewilding nonsense." I nodded. "Totally fair. You're entitled to your opinion." She seemed caught off guard by my calm. Then I added, "Of course, so are the judges from the National Habitat Award, who asked me to speak at next month's garden conference." Her mouth opened slightly. I smiled, gave Duchess a pat on the head, and went back to watering my milkweed. That was our last real conversation. But the real consequence came not from anything I said or did, but from the HOA itself. Because while Laura had been busy inventing councils and handing out fake citations, she'd neglected one tiny, inconvenient detail. Her own yard was out of compliance. The sprinkler system had broken, something neighbors whispered about but no one dared mention. Her grass turned a sad, crunchy beige. The flamingos began to fade. The bird bath grew algae. And someone, I'll never say who, reported her. Officially. The HOA sent her a letter. A real one. Signed by Susan Chen. Violation of Section 3.1, Lawn Maintenance and Pest Control. Laura. Fined. For her own yard. I saw the letter peeking out of her mailbox. That big, bold HOA header visible through the envelope window. It was poetic. It was karmic. It was delicious. Then came the public showdown. Every summer, our neighborhood throws a yard and garden walk. A casual event where residents open their yards for people to stroll through. Lemonade stands. Kids with sidewalk chalk. The whole block smells like sunscreen and grilled corn. Guess who was not invited to participate this year? Laura. Guess who had the longest line of visitors? Yours truly. People came with questions, notebooks, cameras. I gave mini tours. Explained the importance of native pollinators. A local nursery even donated seeds for me to hand out. It was the most connected I'd ever felt to my community. At one point, I saw Laura standing across the street, watching silently. She held a drink in one hand, something pink and sweating, but didn't cross over. She looked like she wanted to say something, then didn't. I waved. She turned and walked back to her house, Duchess waddling behind her. That evening, as the last guests left and the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Margaret and I sat on my porch sipping sparkling water from mismatched mugs. You know, she said, if someone had told me 6 months ago that your garden would cause a revolution, I would have laughed, I said. And now look at you. Local celebrity. Plant queen. Lawn justice warrior. I grinned. What can I say? Never underestimate a woman with a watering can and a grudge. We both burst out laughing. But the universe wasn't quite done. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. Community Champions Banquet, honoring local environmental stewards. I'd been nominated by the State Council for Community Impact. And the best part? The award came with a plaque. I mounted it on a cedar post and placed it, strategically, right near the edge of my garden, where it was plainly visible from the sidewalk. And if that sidewalk just happened to be part of Laura's daily walking route? Well, I call that design with intention. Since then, peace has returned to the neighborhood. Mostly. Laura still exists, of course. Still walks Duchess. Still watches things. But she's quieter now. Smaller somehow. Like a balloon slowly deflating after a birthday party no one stayed to clean up. And me? I still pull weeds, prune the echinacea, and chat with bees. But now, when I do, people join me. They ask questions. Share seeds. One neighbor brought over cookies shaped like flowers. Another offered to help build a rain barrel system. We even started a community compost bin. It turns out, standing your ground, even in soil, can grow more than just plants. It grows people. And connection. And the occasional sarcastic yard sign. Because just last week, I added one more little touch to my front garden. A small wooden stake, painted white. On it, a handwritten sign in black ink. This garden survived an HOA fine, a clipboard crusader, and a flamingo dictatorship. Pollinators welcome. Karens, proceed with caution. Margaret laughed so hard when she saw it, she nearly dropped her iced tea. But it was the mailman's reaction that sealed the deal. He walked up, read the sign, looked at me with a smirk, and said, "You should have added goats." I paused, smiling. Then said, "Funny you mention that. Because next month? We're adopting 2 pygmy goats to help clear out the back lot behind the community center. Turns out they're great for the environment. And very hard to regulate.